If I stand here, can you hear me?
Oh.
The right answer is yes. Okay. Am I online too? Okay, so I have to be, I said to Kari, I have to be polite. It's being recorded. Well, welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. I think, frankly, I think it's really a gift that folks want to pay attention to this. I mean, after all, it's a responsibility that we all share, that to sort of drill down and think carefully about the details of what we're about together to be good and wise and bold stewards of things. You know, that matters. And the way we treat each other. I mean, after all, you're putting some in and I'm putting some in and we're taking care of each other's stuff. And so for all of that, I'm just really grateful for your willingness to come and attend to this important subject. I'm not going to talk the whole morning because pretty soon we'll get up in front of you people who actually know the real numbers. But I maybe first want to say thank you to all the members of the Congregation Council. We have some very good-looking people running the church council. The president of the congregation is Marco, and then Christina, she's vice president these days. And Frank, is Frank in the room? I think Frank is in the room. Yeah, he's been the secretary of the congregation. And then, of course, is Andrea in the room?
She will be.
She will be. When you see Andrea, you know what you got to do? Here she comes. She does amazing work, and we're so thankful for that. But Carly and Lisa and Emma and Jeff and Karen and Kari and Keith and Karen and Matt. Did I get the right Karens and Karens in there in the right order? But these are people who actually care, and I know that you share my gratitude for all of their work. They're all volunteers, and to do all this stuff takes hours. We've also got some folks on the personnel committee. Some of you know pretty well Jordan. Jordan is one of the moms of little squirts, and she's very cool. She, in her vocational life, is kind of an expert around HR. So to have her chairing personnel committee has just been fabulous. There are others who do that too, Connie and Frank and Brian and Jim and Jeff, mostly people who have been presidents of the congregation. You graduate, I don't know, to be on the personnel committee. But there's also a whole gaggle of folks who serve on the finance committee, and chairing that whole deal is this young guy. I think we found a picture from 20 years ago, Kyle. He still looks good. You know that Chris Marl too. Chris does a lot of the accounts payable and manages that stuff. And Ned is on the team. And now Karma is in the room. How do we feel about Karma? See, this is good. And honestly, that it takes some hours to do that. I mean, you know, sit in front of a screen and crunch numbers to be sure, to be accurate, to be careful with one another's contributions. So we're blessed. There's a whole crew too of people who count it all. Donna and Karen and Jan and Jim, Roberta and Karen Clements. We love to call her the Countess. At least I think that's what Dan calls her. Okay, I'm just going to do a few things here to show you who some of these folks are, but also to look at really who you are, to look at how we behave and function as a congregation. Because in the big picture of things, there are 230. Yeah. The Constitution or the ELCA calls them units. I prefer households, but that's right. This is the number of households in the life of the congregation that made a charitable contribution of record in 2023. That's kind of an applause line. You know, that means people went out of their way consciously, deliberately to make a plan and share something, to invest in an organization that we love. So they're to be commended. And they did that by the regular offering. They did that with cash from wallets and purses. They did that by writing checks. And a lot of you know about electronic automatic transfers. In fact, Karma, how many households now do that by automatic? Okay. Which do you prefer? People handing you dollar bills or?
transfers are actually the most secure, the easiest. However, there are a few fees involved
Yeah.
with that, but that's just my thing.
Yeah.
But certainly we take tax.
If you love karma, sign up for automatic electronic. All right. And you can do that on the website. There's a way to give. Pretty soon you'll see this thing pop up and you click on that. It guides you through the whole process. You can make a one-time contribution or have that be reoccurring. For 100 years, you could just keep that going. So that's how they did that. There was at least one member this last year who made a contribution through their bequest. That person is no longer with us, but they made a plan to be sure that our saviors would receive that gift. Did that with that last will and testament. Some of you have figured out how to get your employers to match your contribution. Some of you have figured out how to even set up your own foundations, and we get contributions from those things, which is pretty cool. That you can allocate from within your own foundation, your own fund, causes that you care about. All right. Raise your hand if you know what an RMD is. Oh, yeah. Help me out, Dennis. Just what is that? 50 points. Yes. And some who are in those retirement years, that not only is a required distribution, you have to do that, but you can allocate that, designate that to come to our saviors, and that's very helpful. One thing.
If you talk to your accountant, whoever handles your accounts, and it comes directly through your account, then there's no taxes.
Yeah.
If you get like from your account, put it in your savings account, and then you make a contribution, you pay tax on that. I know that your funds do it by themselves. You don't.
Right.
Use tax.
Keep your own hands off it, so to speak. Yeah. All right. This is a generous congregation. I'm not going to linger on all these, but people have contributed this last year to the Memorial Fund. People have contributed to the holiday food drive. Wow, big time. I just am impressed with the generosity that way. People have also contributed to children, youth, and family ministry. They want to make sure that those teenagers can actually get to New Orleans coming up. But there are other things that have been funded generously for young people. People, a lot of you have participated in, cooked for, invested in the Hot Meals Coalition. All that is great. You also have done it through the congregation to Cocoon House. There frequently are people who contribute to Housing Hope and to other local agencies, and they do that through the congregation, and that blesses. Some have been doing it through the congregation to some of these organizations that work on our behalf beyond the local scene, and that matters as well. Ashley's not in the room. She could tell us how many kids get to go to school on scholarship because of you. I mean, how cool is that? That a little kid gets a chance who otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford it, gets to go. And there's a lot of you that have seen to it that can happen. But there's something you need to know about all of these. The operations of the congregation are understood differently and distinctly from all of these. For all this, we're totally thankful, but it's useful to keep in mind that all of that is separate from the offering plan, the way that we support our regular offering. So let's think about this. Tithes and offerings this last year amounted to more than $631,000, which is really, to me, makes me want to rejoice that those 230 households figured out a way to make sure that the first and the basic foundational offering comes to us. So we're grateful. What does the operating budget of the congregation do? If that's what actually comes in, what do we do with all that money? I mean, you got to know this. Pat Good always used to say it keeps the home fires burning. That's what keeps all of those other projects actually working, is because if we have the things going. So we give first back to the synod. We take care of the payroll. There are a number of people in the employ of the congregation, and we make sure that they're treated fairly. We also, of course, there are program costs. We buy curriculum, and right now there's a bunch of kids who are using glitter and crayons. There are things that we have to fund to do that. Different supplies, how many had coffee today? There are utility bills too. The furnace is running. And, you know, that's not getting any less expensive. As you're all going, yeah, tell me about it. This was a big one last year. We had to fix stuff. We had to fix a lot of stuff. We also have a mortgage. You know that we did the great big campaign to build the commons and we raised more than half of that. Well, we're still paying off some debt there. So a relatively small percentage of our actual operating budget just goes to pay the bank. All right, a couple more things and I'm going to get out of the way. Important ministries are Savior's funded by non-operating budget sources. Because some of you by now are asking, well, wait a minute, there's other things we do. Where does the money for that come from? How do we pay for preschool? Tuition. It's almost 100% of preschool gets covered by the tuition of those families who participate. And by the way, I think right now there's about 170 families in our preschool. How is that funded? People on council will tell you. That's mostly by grant. Gets funded by the ELCA and by the Synod and by the participants who share in that program. We contribute in kind. I mean, we provide a place, we help clean up afterward, and we go through a good number of guitar strings, you know, to do that. How about making waves in kids, music, and arts? Who pays for that? Yeah. Karen knows the answer to that. The endowment fund is actually is earning some dollars that helps us fund some of these special things, which has been terrific because right at this very moment, there are teenagers who are doing music together. There have been other special campaigns and projects along the way. I mentioned already the Commons. That was, you know, just now almost 10 years ago, probably the biggest project that a congregation ever undertook. We did, you know, right in the middle of COVID, we decided it was the right time to fix the lights. And we did that and we raised the dollars to do all of that. By now, most folks have heard that we're also contemplating now outside at Our Savior's. So that over the course of the next couple of years, you're going to see invitation to, you know, invest in security and new lighting outside. You're going to see people asking us to help make sure that the play areas have the equipment that they need. Eventually, we're going to have to raise something for pavement. I mean, sexy pavement. But, you know, some things we got to take care of. And so those kinds of things are coming up. People also contributed through memorial and special gifts. We were hoping it would be done by today, but the snow changed their plan. But there was enough donated to do some new interior signage that is not operations, but it's something that will help folks navigate when they're within the building. All right. The assets of the congregation. You could guess. We have a campus. I don't know, somebody tell me how many leaves are on campus. I don't actually know. Bob Spencer, how many leaves do we have?
That was 73,000 billion.
Billion gazillion. I think so. And I don't even know how many acres that is, but you know, we have facilities and buildings and all that. They all are in the possession of the congregation. And this is what it looks like in the spring. We also have furnishings and instruments. You know, we've got pews, we've got a pipe organ, we have computers and all those things that help us do all the work. We have checking and savings balances. Kyle will share a lot of that stuff. There's also an endowment fund that has some earnings and some principal. And we invest that in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. We also have an amazing fellowship of devoted, resilient, gracious, and courageous friends and members of the congregation. This picture, I think, is about almost 10 years old now, but look at that good-looking bunch. People who historically and wonderfully and generously supported it. So those are, I don't know, I like to use the word assets to describe the kind of people that we are. All right. The Constitution says that every year somebody's got to put in front of the congregation a budget. Whose responsibility is that? It's the councils. It's the councils. And they have been working at that. In fact, this last Tuesday night, Marco will tell you, they voted unanimously they voted unanimously to recommend to all of you the numbers that we're going to show you in just a minute. And how did they do that? Well, they had to do a little bit of homework. They had to do some consulting with the finance committee, with the personnel committee, with property and grounds, and then of course, all the program leaders. We do have folks who are responsible for youth stuff and for music stuff. Is Jeff Peterson in the room? We do have to pay the light bill, and the light bill is not getting smaller. So there are things that we have to do in order to keep track of all that. Okay. Their recommendation for this year is based on several factors, and Kyle will likely come back to these. But you know that always the best indicator of where you're going next is what? Is where you've been. And so by far and away, the most telling sort of way to analyze, predict, and imagine and forecast that is to look carefully at what we did the last year. We just have to tell the truth about things are costing more. You know that, and we know that as well. There's some important adjustments to a couple of positions on the church's staff, and Kyle will talk more about that. We have to change those positions because we've added some responsibilities to them, and the big picture of funding is changing a little bit. More about that. They were also pretty serious about a cost of living increase. Not only does it cost more for the congregation to do its work, but everyone in this room, it costs you more at the grocery store. And so we're just trying to be clear and honest about the cost of living. They're going to tell you the truth about how much is in the bank. And they're also going to tell you again about the amazing and growing fellowship of devoted, resilient, gracious, and courageous friends and members of the congregation. That's you. That is all of you. All right. Are you ready to look at some numbers? Any questions about any of that? Andrea's in the room. We're not going to drag her up in the front, but we may, try to trip her up with a hard, complicated question. And Karma too. But the chair of the finance committee is Kyle Turner, and here he comes. I should.
Okay, can you hear me? All right. So this is the numbers. First, the good news, and then the better news. And I'll try and get through this. I'm interruptible. If you have a question, raise your hand. If you're online, if you put it in the chat, Marco will relay it. So here we go. This is a historical snapshot of where we've been. And as you can see, we outperformed in December of 2023. I think our initial goal was 610. We came in at 631, which is highly gratifying for the finance committee because it makes our job a whole lot easier. So thank you for that. Next up, this is the collected bank balances. The top line there where it says $302,000, that's the line that our treasurer looks at on a regular basis to be sure that there's money in the account to cover all the expenses. And in the next slide, we'll see that not all of that is immediately available for operating expenses. And then in the bottom half of this is a snapshot of the endowment. Over there on the far side, you'll see the part of the endowment is dedicated to music and ministry, the principal amount, and then the earnings. The earnings are what we have to spend. And then on the right-hand side there is the unrestricted endowment, both the principal and the earnings. So any questions on that? By the way, this slide deck is available if you want to look at these in more detail with more time. I think Beth in the office can email these to you. Yes.
The 83,000, the earnings, that's what's being spent, not the.
That's correct. That's what's available to to be used, to be expended. And that generally begins with a recommendation from the endowment committee. It is approved by council, and then the money can be taken out and put in checking. So this is why we don't have $300,000 to spend in operating. These are the fund accounts, and as you can see, capital is at the top there. Memorials, columbarium. The holiday food drive is in flux. Andrea has assured me that we have transferred 2 significant sums to Volunteers of America here just recently. So that's what that is. Okay, so here is a snapshot of the income side. I'll start on the 2023. As I said, we originally budgeted or aimed for 610, and the congregation overachieved by contributing 631 in tithes and offerings. The rest of it is pretty even, with the exception of the rental on the beige house. We lost our tenant, and so we have a slight decline in earnings there. But other than that, it's the actuals for 2023 came out fairly close. Going forward, looking at 2024, the expectation is $650,000 for tithes and offerings, which represents about a 3.5 or 4%. You know, somebody do the math for me. 3%, I think, a little over 3%. And we expect to have a full year of rental on the beige house and the blue house. And other than that, it's pretty even. The bottom line there is, as you can see, is $747,000. Going over to the expense side, in 2023, we had a couple of hiccups. One of them was getting the blue house ready to rent, and we ran over on property and grounds, getting that place ready to go. So we were a little bit off there, and also there was a slight increase on in the salaries and total compensation, and that's the result, I believe, of squaring away the taxes. As you're aware, the synod pays for family friends, and we pay for an associate pastor part-time, and it's not always easy to square those funds when they come in, but we think we have a good grip on it this time. Looking forward to 2024, there are 2 major adjustments in the personnel budget. The first is $15,000. $10,000 is an adjustment for the associate pastor, and $5,000 is an adjustment for the director of children, youth, and family. Both those sums are the result of increased responsibilities for both those positions. And then in addition to that, we are recommending a 2% COLA for the entire staff. So that's the big change on the expense side. The other numbers are, as you can see, fairly even. And I think you'll all agree that the salaries or the personnel expenses, it's the most important, it's the biggest line item. And I think these next slides will show where that goes. We have 4 full-time employees, and you know the names that go with these titles. We also have several part-time employees, and again, I'm sure you all know the names here. Okay, so now these are employees of the congregation that are funded outside the operating budget. So this is not in the $47,000. Making Waves and Kids Music and Arts, excuse me, are funded by endowment dollars from the Music and Ministry Fund. There we have a preschool, as you know, there's a total of 18 employees there, and those are the titles. We get Synod support for the Family Friends Gathering, and so these next few slides are going to be back to general operating. This is our support for the Synod, and that's even from last year. This is the office expenses. It's pretty even against last year. Building and grounds, there are some changes here, and one of them is as you can see, the Beige House, our previous tenant was a nonprofit, and they were able to get an exemption on the property taxes because they were a nonprofit. Now that it's a rental, church owned, we have to pay the property taxes, so that's going to cost. The insurance is up, as you can see, and there's several other things that are bumped up there a little bit. I don't think there are any other major changes there. Oh, excuse me. Good point. Andrew's mentioning we were getting a free ride on the electricity that supplies the cell tower next to the Blue House, because the bills from the PUD were essentially being paid by the previous tenant. We've gotten that separated now, and we're negotiating with the people that lease the property for the cell tower to take that on. But in the meantime, we're going to have to cover that expense. Okay, so this is music. It's we overspent last year a little bit on equipment, but we don't expect that expense to recur in 2024, so we're pretty even there. Ministry expenses, the big change there is down there at the bottom, and this is just I guess you'd say housekeeping on the finance committee side. We're moving meals out of what used to be the evangelism line and making it more clear. So things like Salmon Sunday, even though people contribute to that, the expenses get logged in that line. Okay, adult learning. That's Marco's gig, and that's pretty even. These are miscellaneous expenses. There aren't any big changes here, except for miscellaneous, and I be honest with you, I don't know exactly what's in that bucket. Okay, so this is the preschool budget, which we will bring up at the congregational meeting in June for approval. But this is an opportunity for us to get a look at their numbers. Again, they have substantial personnel expenses, but all their expenses are covered by tuition, and in addition, they remit some space support to the church to cover the expenses associated with maintaining their presence. Okay, so this is coming up next here. This is what we're going to vote on next week. It's a summary. Again, tithes and offerings, the expectation there is $650,000, which is an increase over 2023. It's not a huge increase. And my expectation is that we will meet it, possibly exceed it. And then on the expense side, as I pointed out earlier, we're adding a little bit on personnel, putting a COLA in there. So that would be our total. And again, this is what we would be voting on next week. So any questions? Tim?
What was the 2% COLA compared to the actual CPI? Seems low.
Well, it may be, it's what we can afford. And I have to be perfectly honest with you, before we had that big December number, when we were meeting in personnel, or when we were meeting in finance, we were not contemplating a COLA at all. The senior pastor was adamant that those two adjustments be made, for the associate pastor and for the director of children, youth and family. And so that's what we put up top as a top priority. And the 2% COLA is what we felt we could afford.
This came from the personnel committee, recommendation.
Yeah, that's true. The COLA is the recommendation of the personnel committee. Yes, Rick?
Pastor Deb went from 22.5 to 0.50 as far as is that?
She's been 0.50 for family friends, and she's been 0.50 for our saviors, but that's she's been 0.50 for our saviors for 2 years.
Without it, right?
She's nodding her head back there, yes. Yes. Just a general trend line. And I think that my own personal view is that our saviors is on the upswing. We're on a roll. We're doing really well. And I would not want to sell us short. Yes.
What's membership growth like?
Okay, I don't have an answer to that question, and not an intelligent one. Perhaps Pastor David does.
We could probably look at the annual report to the Senate, because I don't have those numbers in my head. But you know that the way the Constitution describes membership in any congregation based on two things. What are the two things? Congregational record in the course of a calendar year and Holy Communion. Yeah. So if that's our real number, that's as probably reliable a number as anything. So we've looked at the trend lines for as Rick would say, the unit, so the households contributing. And then just actually plain old numbers of bodies and pews for worship. And both those numbers are going up. 2023 was bigger than 22. And then you get a little further back and COVID crazy. But yeah, the last couple of years, we're line up.
I'm only a member for 2 years. And what I see is that it looks like there's more people in the pews. It looks like there's more people taking communion each week. Yeah. And so an anticipation that giving is going to go up, the measure of that is not unreasonable.
Okay, Kurt, I think you had a question.
Well, I have a bunch of thoughts, but anyway, the one thought I was going to ask was, we do have the adult education, and we have brought in speakers that have, you know, do we have money? I didn't see very much. I saw only $1,000 up there, so I can't imagine that covered what. What
Marco might speak to that too, but I would tell you that when the Reverend Dr. Rick Rouse gives a class, he charges exorbitantly. He wants at least $1. Right, you know, and other the speakers who kind of do that, it's true. We figured out some ways to meet their expenses. When Pastor Dave Ellenson came just a couple of weeks ago, we put something in there for that. When Reverend Terry Kylo comes here next month, there'll be something in the after that. But there are a handful of folks who have actually just kind of contributed on the side to make sure that those costs are covered. So in the operating budget, $1,000 is fairly accurate.
The other angle on that might be that some expenses come up, and the memorial committee we'll meet and make a recommendation to council to cover that. Going back a few years to when I was on council, I remember a couple of occasions where that happened.
We can track that better this year, I think. Suggest.
Okay,
I said this because I know we seem to have a robust adult education. And I just, and we have people that are coming in, just, yeah, this.
are there other questions? Okay. Thank you. All right, I'll relinquish the microphone.
Well. We probably have more questions, but,
Yeah, I know it, we really, honestly, we're trying to figure out kind of a balancing act. Because when we get together for a congregational meeting and you have, a couple of hundred people in the room. How do you present something that is detailed enough that people really know what you're talking about? But not so detailed that you're trying to figure out the cost of toilet paper. Or, you drill down to so much detail that you just can't even deal with it. And so that was one reason that prompted us to do this little deeper dive into how money works in the joint at a time like this. We want, and like Kyle mentioned, we have all of this data and it can be emailed to anybody if you want. We'll save a little bit of paper. We could have, cut down a few trees today to put more paper in your hands, but we have all that. And we just want to make sure that everybody has what they need to make a good decision next Sunday. We're going to hang around for a little while because there might be questions you're too embarrassed to ask in the middle of a big group. But I'm not kidding when I say to Karma and to Andrea and to, really another handful of volunteers who give hours to managing all this stuff. And they do that as volunteers. And, other organizations our size, when you have 600,000 or 700,000 in operating and another $1 million or $2 million in endowment and another, $250,000 for the preschool, that's a lot to manage. And we don't have a finance director. We don't pay somebody to keep books around here. Volunteers do that. And that is amazing. And I think they should be commended again. And we also want Andrea to, want them to have the job for at least 20 more years.
Looking for my replacement.
Okay. Thanks, gang. We're gonna hang around, ask any question you want. I don't know, maybe online, there's nothing in the chat. Okay. Thanks, everybody.